Our entire society is built on celebrating all the things that will kill you.
Biggest scam industry in the world is the vitamin industry. It's like 90% plus of these vitamins you don't need, these supplements you don't need.
Once you hit a certain age, you want to get your testosterone checked. I'll get mine checked, and almost all the doctors are like, oh, it's totally normal, you're where you should be. You've got to find specific doctors that are helping you from a performance perspective to be what you want to be, not just like the average. I don't want to be average.
For sure, veganism is wrong. And I can tell you very simply why it's wrong, because of where your eyes are.
When you can conquer hunger, which I believe is the most difficult thing for people, you really realize, holy shit, I can do anything. I'm unstoppable now.
Welcome to the Best Half podcast, all about the big idea that the second half of your life could be 10 times better than your first. And this is an exciting day, Roman, because we just got some figures back from Apple.
It's huge. Apple just said we're the #1 standing podcast in the world. That means two guys standing doing a podcast. So we're
standing, not sitting.
Not sitting.
Why?
Because we know that sitting is the new smoking. So yeah, so we're taking Tim Cook's advice. We're standing. And thank you, Apple, for the recognition, being the #1 stand-up podcast. And we're also the fastest growing. So we're really excited. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, I mean, anything's possible from a small base. But
that's right.
And it's great to be here. So today we're going to be talking about some issues around health. Health, wealth, and relationships is kind of what we talk about here on the Best Half. And, why health? So I had an interesting question the other day. If you could have more time, money, or health, what would you pick?
Wow.
It's a tough one.
Oh my gosh. Like normally I'd say time.
Yeah,
but time without health, like it's not good.
Right.
Yeah, it's tough.
And time without money is not good. And if you don't have money, that's not as easy to buy yourself health. It's interesting. Yeah. So I think to some degree, these are a bit fungible. I mean, if you can invest time into more health, and we certainly do.
Yeah.
We were at Othership on the weekend.
Yes.
Converting our time into sauna and 2 minutes of cold plunge.
Am I allowed to tell that story?
Okay. Okay.
So Mark has made me do the most difficult things in my life. So I was violently opposed to intermittent fasting for many years. So every time he'd bring it up, I'd have to explain to him I'm Ukrainian, and when you're Ukrainian, you never miss a meal ever.
Pierogies.
Yeah, you can never miss a meal because food is love. So for 5 years, I was just, violently opposed. But he was right, and it's been life-changing for me. Like that intermittent fasting for me has been it is the most difficult thing I've ever done, but probably the most beneficial. So the second thing that's come up is this cold plunge. And I'm like, oh gosh, like I don't even like when the shower's cold for the first 30 seconds when the water comes out. Like I don't like that. So I've been violently opposed to the cold plunge. But Mark finally convinced me to do it. So I went to this amazing place called Othership. Actually, it's you and Dana White convinced me.
Okay.
Because Dana White did go to this place in Yorkville. It's called Othership. And he called it the coolest place or the best place in the world. And I got to say, Dana was right and Mark, you're right. But what was interesting about it, it's an interesting experience. You go, you put your bathing suit on. It's a co-ed change room, which has been unusual for me. Very, very attractive people. Like, I don't think I've seen so many attractive people in one place in Toronto before. And then you kind of go and you congregate. It's really cool. And then like 90 people get in a sauna, like this huge sauna. It's beautiful. So I see Mark walk in, and there's, again, very attractive people, but there's one that's just like extremely attractive, like supermodel attractive. Of course, Mark walks right in the sauna directly to her, and you made a very good friend.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah, she's interesting. Not so interesting. Not actually totally my type. Tall, attractive blonde.
Yeah, that supermodel physique isn't the kind you like, right?
But maybe that actually makes it work, because to me, she wasn't necessarily anything special, and she's probably not used to that. So she's probably used to people, absolutely fawning over her. But anyway, interesting lady, actually a Salesforce.com sales rep. So we ended up bonding over that.
To me, that experience, Mark, was important because usually when somebody like a woman's super attractive, no one hits on her.
Right.
Like when you talk to those women, like they're like, no guy, because they're scared to.
Yeah.
But you have no fear. You absolutely have zero fear. So yeah, you definitely got legendary status.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad that you appreciate it. I'll let you know how things go. We're actually continuing to chat almost every day. So
good.
Anyway, let's get back to time,
health,
health, and wealth. So I think you're right. the conventional wisdom would be, well, time, because time is the one asset you can't get any more of. But I think you can make a case that health's pretty difficult to get back if you lose it. Although both of us have had ups and downs, we both have gained a lot of weight and lost it and such. Both of us are on the right path, now today. And money's the same. You can make it and lose it. Once you lose it, it's hard to get it back. Probably the easiest thing to get back, I think, is money. But health is one of the things we're going to talk about today. There's a few topics that that are interesting. I've been on an interesting journey around health my whole life. I mean, I was overweight from the time I was 13. I turned 13.
Wow.
And it was, ever since then, it's been difficult. I remember when I actually was in shape in university, my biochemistry professor said, just so you know, you're going to be battling for the rest of your life. You're going to have a hard time with your weight because those fat cells are always hungry. Right. He also told me something interesting when we get to the supplements, which is like most supplements are totally bullshit and you should never take them.
Right.
And I'm not sure he's right. So I think we'll get to that,
Talk about that
later. But, I've been lifting weights since I was 13. I've been, off and on diets. I can gain and lose 50 pounds pretty, fairly easily. COVID was not good for me. I put on quite a bit of weight then. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty interesting. I feel like we're on track. We've actually, used the forcing function idea that we talked about a couple of episodes. We've hired a photographer who's going to shoot, fitness photographs of us on June the 22nd, 2024.
Oh boy. I thought it was 2025. Okay. It's 2024. Okay, good.
Little more time. But yeah, so we're going to go talk about that. Maybe a little bit about your sort of journey around health.
So mine has been a challenge. So until the age of 30, I was like really skinny and I think somewhat healthy. And then when they talk about you gain 1 pound of fat every year after 30, oh my gosh, like I was like the case study for it. And I turned 30, I started my first business, or the first really successful business, N5R. And I was really focused on the business and I wasn't focused on like working out, my health. And then, got married, had 3 kids, again, not focused so much on health. So I was just getting fatter and fatter. And for me, COVID was the opposite. So COVID, all of a sudden I've got all this time in the world and I'm like, nobody wants to meet with me. Like, what am I gonna do? So I'm like, I'm gonna go on a bit of a fitness kick. And that's why I started experimenting a lot of different things. And like most things did not work for me. And I think it's different for everybody. Like, I don't think there's any right answer, as we all know, but I had to find what actually worked for me. But it took me years, like we're now like 3 years in, of actually, okay, this actually works for me.
Yeah. And that's what I want to do here, is to short circuit some of wrong turns that many people do. I've done huge amounts of research and so have you, to figure out not just what works for us, but what works for lots of other people. You will have seen me gain quite a bit of weight while I was at Eloqua. So just before I started Eloqua, I did a physique transformation contest. Where I had lost like 30 pounds of fat. I put on muscle. I got to 6% body fat. I've got to show the photo of it. It's
Nishan, we got to get that photo because it's pretty amazing.
It's pretty awesome what happened. The great thing is it was done by, it was the CEO of a supplement company who did this contest. We gave away a Lamborghini to win if you won in various different categories. So really, really interesting. And my feeling is that the bodybuilders really figured a lot of this stuff out. Like if you read Arnold Schwarzenegger's Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding, which was written in his, I think in the early 70s, he didn't necessarily know all the science back then. He just knew because all their buddies were trying lots of different things and figuring out what worked. But one of the things, I guess, when it comes to, do you focus on diet or training? These guys who did this physique transformation contest said very clearly diet is more important. That's conventional wisdom. By far. You probably heard that. 80% is diet, right? That, you can do all the training in the world, but if you're consuming too many calories, it's not going to work. But I don't think it's that simple, right? And for sure, it's unfortunate because we like to eat. So especially now at this age, we really have to get that right. But I think the training is still absolutely essential. And the big reason why is, frankly, the mental and emotional and hormonal component of it.
There's so many benefits. It's
like
incredible.
You kind of have to do it. Because otherwise, if you're working out really hard, right, then you're probably more likely to stick to your diet. For me, the diet is mostly all psychological. I don't know about you, but if I'm either in a very positive emotional state or a negative emotional state. Either one. If I'm right in the middle, I'm good.
Yeah.
But if I'm actually having a great day,
Yeah.
I want to make it even better.
Right.
And I want to eat that food. If I'm having a crappy day, I want to eat or to feel better.
Yeah, interesting.
So much of it is
It's
psychological.
for sure.
And I think that the regular training, I think it actually helps you deal with the psychological components and stay on track.
Yes.
So I do think you need to do both, but I would say that if all you do is focus on the diet and can stick to it, you'll probably get further to your goals than if you were just focused on training.
100% agree. I even tried Ozempic last
you
year.
Did? Okay.
Yeah, so even if you just do Ozempic, okay, because immediately you're going to start losing weight because you're not hungry. It conquers the biggest issue we have, which is hunger.
Yeah.
So you're not hungry. The downside of it is when I did my DEXA scan, and maybe you do a better job explaining what a DEXA scan is.
Sure. I mean, yeah, it's something that measures the percentage of lean versus fat in your body.
Right.
And I think it even can distinguish between like organs and stuff.
Yes,
and,
it can.
And muscle.
Yeah.
So it gives you the most accurate.
Yeah. So you go in this machine, it feels like an MRI. But what I saw was, like I'd lost weight. So that was great. I looked better. But I was like skinny fat.
Yeah.
So what happens if you're not working out when you're taking Ozempic, you're like, that's a problem. But it's true of anyway. If you lose a lot of weight anyways, you're going to lose a lot of muscle. So now I've refocused to do a lot more muscle building. Yeah. And this morning I got a lecture from my 15-year-old son, Carter. And Carter said, Dad, I really just think you should just go to a regular gym and just like lift weights like everybody else. I said, yeah, it's good advice, but I do like my F45 because in 45 minutes I get everything done. But yeah, that was my son's advice.
Yeah, and we'll get to that actually. We'll get to HIIT versus strength or whatever. I've actually normally I'm a strength trainer. That's what I did this morning. Actually hit my all-time record. I PR'd today. I feel amazing. 285 pounds on incline press.
Wow.
Really good.
Wow.
And one of the things about so HIIT's got positive. We'll talk about that, right?
Yeah.
It's I think everything has its place.
Yeah.
So I can see why he'd say that. But it's interesting what you just mentioned about Ozempic, because that's what I've heard is that it actually burns through lean too, burns through muscle.
That's exactly right.
And I look at that as sort of production capacity. So I mean, a lot of what we have to do when we manage a business, we manage a family, a lot of things is production versus production capacity. We have to produce things, but we also, if we don't increase our ability to produce, then ultimately we're going to fail, right? So what the muscle does is it just builds this amazing reserve that's torching fat when you're sleeping.
Right.
And so if you're burning through that, so yeah, you might lose weight, but the rebound effect is going to be absolutely huge. And actually it's the rebound effect, which is why I got intermittent fasting in the first place. I read this article that totally horrified me. This was, this is before I started doing intermittent fasting, seriously, because I heard about it too for years and I said, this doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Because I knew from when I did this physique transformation contest, back then the conventional wisdom was you should be eating all the time.
Right.
Right. You should be eating all the time because then your body is never convinced that it's hungry. It's never convinced that it's starving.
Right.
And that and when the body thinks it's hungry, it's a problem. Right. So that was the conventional wisdom for like years and years and years, even among like the pros, which is all wrong.
Yeah.
And so this article basically looked at the contestants for the show called the Biggest Loser.
Right.
And these are people who would lose 200, even 300 plus pounds. And these scientists from McMaster found this really horrifying result. And the result was all of these people, not only did they gain the weight back, many of them were even heavier than before 18 months later.
Yeah.
And the reason why they did these metabolic studies on these guys, and these guys could like eat nothing but frickin' celery and they'd gain weight. Like their metabolic rate had absolutely collapsed.
Wow.
So that normally, you'd be burning, let's say 2,000 calories a day. They were burning like 900 calories a day.
Yeah.
So I looked at that and I'm like, I'm effed. This is not good because my weight's been cycling up and then I've had this yo-yo effect. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm screwed. My metabolic rate's probably like really small. So I started doing all this research on what do you do to keep your metabolic rate high? And I found this guy, Dr. Jason Fung, who's actually another Toronto guy. This guy should win a Nobel Prize. I mean, he has single-handedly popularized intermittent fasting for the world.
Wow.
Yeah, he's a nephrologist, so he's not a weight loss guy.
Right.
And he wanted to study what was going, because he needed to get his patients to lose weight, and nothing was really working. So he started to go into the old literature, and he started to get into intermittent fasting. And one of the great benefits of intermittent fasting is that your metabolic rate doesn't crash as much. So if you calorie restrict, so instead of having your 2,400 calories a day, you restrict it to 1,800 calories a day, which is what a lot of doctors would tell you to do. What all the diet plans, all the Weight Watchers never tell you to do. You restrict, your metabolic rate goes down. If you eat normally and train hard, but then you compress your feeding window, or you do what I do, which is you spend a day or two where you don't eat at all, your metabolic rate actually stays high. And that got me super excited. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I started especially getting into long fasts, because the weight loss thing. But the other thing too is that all kinds of benefits happen when you do a long fast around anti-cancer, around anti-neurodegenerative disease. We'll get to that in a bit.
I'll echo your example of the yo-yo diet. I think everyone's had that. So my first diet wasn't until I was maybe like in my late 30s, because I hit that point of disgust. I was like, this is like, I'm looking at myself going, this is gross. And I worked incredibly hard at it. So I joined Weight Watchers. So I was doing Weight Watchers meetings. I was doing a 6 a.m., kind of like almost like a HIIT class. I had a trainer as well. And I'm like drinking like protein shakes all day. Okay. Like I was like going hardcore. Yeah. And within about 4 months of going like just completely like all in, like no alcohol, no pasta, no bread, I was able to get to my high school weight. And I'm like, I felt like a rock star. I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is what I weighed in high school. Like this is amazing. And that was great, but I couldn't maintain it. Right. So over time, and it didn't take that much time, like within a couple of years, I was almost back to where I was before. And I'm like, oh my, and it's not like I stopped working out. Like I was still trying, but it was really, really hard. Yeah. So that's when I started going, look, there's gotta be like, there's other things here. Cause I'd done the HIIT workouts, I'd done all these things. But so I started hearing about intermittent fasting, and I came to it from a longevity perspective. I've been obsessed since age of 6. I wanted to live to 100. So I've known this for forever. Became a vegetarian 30 years ago. So if you want to live a very long time, you start, reading. There's some very specific people that are dedicated their lives to longevity and incredibly well-researched. And I start researching, and I'm like, hey, like 6 of the top 10 guys in the world, they're all vegetarian. Like, and they all, like 8 of them intermittent fast. Like I start looking at that. So that's why I started doing the intermittent fasting, because it reverses aging. Like you can literally like, stop or reverse a lot of the signs of cancer. You can revert, there's so many benefits to it. Yeah, no, that was pretty compelling too. And we even know the reason why that happened. So, I mean, a lot of things don't happen in the body until you shock it. And so not going without food is a signal to your body, for your immune system, especially, to start creating B cells, helper T cells, all kinds of things that macrophages that scavenge your damaged cells, which include precancerous cells. Right. So we have, we all have precancerous cells in our body all the time. Yeah. What we really need is a strong immune system to kind of take care of it. So what reboots the system is if I could just interrupt for a sec, Mark, and maybe you agree or disagree, but what I've read is it's what feeds the cancer cells is the sugar. Yeah, so anytime you are consuming sugar, which is in all our foods, that's what's feeding the cancer. Yeah, that's a secondary benefit. It's also, it's huge. That's huge. And it's amazing to, I have a good friend of mine that unfortunately was diagnosed with cancer, breast cancer 3 months ago. And it is shocking to me, the doctors never recommended a dietary change for her. Wow. I had to send her all this stuff, like nothing on, it should be like #1 thing that everyone does. And Jason Fung talks about it. He's, now a famous doctor. He gives lectures everywhere. He's like, all you gotta do is starve the cells. Your body can live just fine on ketones. The cancer cells absolutely need glucose. And there's nothing about that. There's all kinds of natural remedies that are great against cancer. The medical community is not talking about it. There's drugs that are completely safe, like one that starts with I, we can't talk about. Right. We can't talk about because YouTube will zap it. Yeah, but it's actually very effective. The I drug that ends in mectin is actually really, there's now 9 papers. It is unbelievably effective against cancer, as are a number of antifungal
are anti-parasitical drugs.
Right.
But because they're old drugs, they don't make Big Pharma any money,
Right.
and nobody talks about
The
it.
only way we can talk about it, because I know our first video was taken down
Yeah.
because of YouTube, but if you talk about it for dogs, so
Right.
if your dog gets cancer,
Yeah.
you absolutely can go to vets that know what they're talking about,
Yeah.
and they can get this prescribed to the dog, and the dog will be cured of cancer. So we know this is a fact, and we have Nobel Prize winning scientists that have discovered this like 40 years ago,
Yeah.
but of course we don't hear about that anymore. But I know on YouTube it's okay if we reference a dog. It's
Okay,
okay.
so,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, it's
go
okay.
and reference the dog.
Yeah.
And yeah, this goes back to our very first
Yeah.
episode, right? I mean, unfortunately, we can't just accept everything that we learn at face. We have to go dig deeper. And it's part of what we're doing here, right? Is
Right.
that we've actually done a lot of this work.
Yes.
We've evaluated what's in the mainstream. We've also evaluated what's in alternative stuff. And for our audience, we have the benefit of that.
Right.
So let's wrap up this one in a
Yes.
bow. So diet really is, I mean, if you're going to pick between one or the other,
It's
I would
huge.
pick the diet to go to. At the same time, without training, if you're not going to build that reserve of muscle, if you're not going to take care of your mind and your motivation, you're probably going to fail at the diet. So on this one, you really shouldn't choose. You really
You should
do
do
have
both.
to do both of
And
them.
the one thing I'll
Yeah.
mention is for mental health, which is what everybody's suffering from now. What I didn't realize is when you work out and you exercise, the effects are on the brain are incredible.
Right.
So from a mental health perspective, instead of taking all these like drugs that they're trying to give us, just exercise alone can do more. And there's studies on this that can do more to improve your mental health than anything else you could possibly do.
I just saw this. So the number one thing that reduces depression more than anything else, more than all the drugs and even exercise, take a guess. Starts with a D.
It's a drug?
No, it's not a drug.
Okay.
It's actually dancing. So dancing.
Oh, dancing. It's an
is
exercise.
it is like an exercise. It is the number one thing. It's like, honestly, that's all you have to do to relieve depression. And it makes sense. You get going, you're moving, grooving. I thought it was super interesting.
Yeah.
But where are the doctors prescribing dancing
That's
as a
wild.
cure? Again, we have pharmacare, we
Yeah.
have sick care. We actually don't have health care in this country or in the US, unfortunately.
I do think you should maybe present that to your new friend about dancing. I think she might want to go dancing.
Yeah, that's
I think
well
for the health benefits.
it's great as an antidepressant.
Good.
But we touched on the second one, so let's dive deeper into the diet. So you were successful with the keto diet. We talked a little bit intermittent fasting. It's very interesting that for many years, and there are still some doctors like Dr. Oz who still talks about fat as being the enemy, which I mean we know very clearly is wrong. In fact, the more fats that you take, especially the right certain ones like nuts and avocados and even saturated fats. I mean, that was the demon for so long. I just read an article that there were scientists that were paid off basically to say that saturated fat is the enemy, and it's not. I know we may differ a little bit. I think animal protein, animal fat is important. I think it's crazy the idea that there's no way to me that especially veganism is going to be the answer. Vegetarians, at least you have some animal protein.
Yeah, I mean, I think eggs are the perfect food. So I remember when I watched Rocky, and Rocky was made, I think in the late 70s, maybe 79. And Stallone is like literally just, he's taking like raw eggs.
Yes.
And what's interesting, I was watching his documentary recently, and he still forces his daughters to just have the raw eggs. And he's right. I mean, the eggs are the perfect food.
Yeah.
I mean, they're absolutely the perfect
Schwarzenegger
food.
had it as the perfect food.
Yeah.
It's got everything you need.
And if you look at Stallone, again, these are guys that look unbelievable at, late 70s, like amazing. But they were right about a lot of these things. Yeah. So no, I agree. And I think that the issue when you get to diet is everyone's body type's so different. Yeah. And some people, if they became vegan, they'd be really sick. Or if somebody just eat meat all the time, they might get sick. So there's different body types, different blood types.
Yeah, eating meat all the time, though, I've heard a carnivore diet. Some people swear by it. There's some people who look amazing who are on it. Yeah. That doesn't make sense to me either. I mean, we just have to go back to like what we were as cavemen. So for sure, veganism is wrong. And I can tell you very simply why it's wrong, because of where your eyes are and my eyes are. See where our eyes are? They're in the front of our head. You know what that means? We are predator animals. And you look, every tribe all over the world, they eat meat for a reason. That is how we evolved. There's no way that we're not deer. We are not rabbits. We're much more like tigers than we are like them. So even just on that alone, I know that it's wrong. At least vegetarianism, at least you can have some animal protein, which is what we've evolved to. But I think the same thing, like there's no way that humans evolved to eat only meat. I mean, I guess, you know, the Inuit, okay, there's not a lot of vegetables growing up there, like I get it. But it just doesn't make sense. So you have all this bounty growing in the ground, and there's just no way with all of the nutrients that they have available that our bodies have not been adapted to take advantage of it. So that's a lot of, you know, when I think of what decisions, because we have to make these complex decisions, a lot of things, not just about health, a lot about relationships, for example, as well. Like, for example, what have males and females, how have we evolved over time? We're not the same.
Yeah.
Men and women have different strategies to survive, right? If we assume, for example, that women want the same thing as us, that's a problem because we've evolved differently.
Yeah. So
I like evolutionary biology and psychology as a way to think about things. And from a health, it's like, what were we like as cavemen and cavewomen? How have we likely evolved? And we should do things that are in line probably with our evolutionary history.
Probably. It depends what we're optimizing for.
Right.
So if I want to live past 100 and I want to optimize for longevity, and the cavemen never made it past 30, I mean, these are things we have to consider.
Okay.
I also think the meat that we eat here is not real meat. So 50% of all the pharmaceuticals that are made by Big Pharma are injected into these animals. Yeah. I was in Costa Rica, last week, and when you look at the cows and the animals there, they're like skinny. Like they don't look at all like our animals.
Yeah.
Like it's like, what happened? Well, because when you don't feed them all these hormones that make them become twice the size, double the speed. I mean, this doesn't make any sense.
It's true. Yeah, it's crazy. Like I get grass-finished meats, but it's not easy for people to get that.
It's super hard.
And I remember, so I lived in Singapore, and like the chickens, they call them kampong chickens, which are like they run around the village. Yeah. And you're right, they're skinny. The eggs, they don't even refrigerate. Right. So the eggs just sit there outside. Probably Costa Rica is the same way. That's right. Because here they wash off that protective coating around it. So I try to get, and I have a farm that's an hour of it. I try to get, farm fresh eggs for my neighbors, and it's wow, what a amazing difference that makes.
It makes a huge, and everything tastes different. So I think that the problem is our grocery stores, and I don't know if you knew this. Did you know that in Canada we only have 3 companies that control all of the grocery stores? Like I see like 20 different brands. Yeah. There's 3 companies that control our entire food supply. Think about that. Yeah. And their profits are triple what they were pre-COVID. Not double. They're triple. Yeah, they went from 2 billion a year to 6 billion a year. So the 3 companies, when we talk about food inflation and why it's happening, when you've got 3 companies that control all the food in the country, this is what happens. Yeah, and they can feed you poison.
Yeah, that's interesting that their profits have gone up. I can see the revenue, but clearly something's going on.
What's interesting is people are eating less. We're actually eating less groceries than we were 5 years ago in this country. But we have a lot more people. We have millions more people. So people are eating less because of the prices, but yet they're making 3 times the profits. Yeah, there's some really interesting.
Eating more prepared food where there's more profits. Like it doesn't. That would be my guess. It'd be interesting.
More ultra processed food that's cheaper. Yeah.
It's because, I mean, what's profitable for the grocery stores? I mean, that they're trying to push is where they prepare food already, and they're competing with restaurants, right? In that
exactly,
that makes sense. But so it's interesting. So keto, I've not been able to do, and I think one of the challenges with keto is it's not really very good for your social life. I find,
right.
Whereas I find with just keeping the carbs sort of lowish, but then basically what I do is I just have a day and a half a week where I just don't eat, and that's Tuesday. And Tuesday, I know it's just Tuesday's not eating day, so it's really easy for me to make a decision. And like nobody ever wants to go on a date on Tuesday or whatever. Like nothing good happens on Tuesday except Taco Tuesdays. It's probably why they have Taco Tuesdays. It's because nothing good happens on a Tuesday. So let's make tacos cheap. Right. But I found that a lot. And I think the best diet or the best training program is the one you can actually do. Right. So I would never have thought to do an F45 thing before because I'm just like, maybe I'm a little snobbish. I'm used to going to the, the more hardcore gym, doing a hardcore program. But you know what? There's one 5 minutes from my house. Yeah. I can walk there. Yeah. I can get, not only I can get a cardio and strength in the same workout. Right. It's convenient, right? Yeah. And they
make it fun. And you know what it is? It's the music. What happens is today for about 1 minute, the music was off at the F45.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this sucks. Like this, like, it gets so not fun exercise. But when they're blaring great music, like on Saturdays they have a DJ, like it's a different experience. But what your comment, Mark, I want to double click on that. None of this is actually fun or good for our social life.
Okay.
Our entire society is built on celebrating all the things that will kill you. Right. So every time you get together as a family, you overeat, you indulge, like you just go crazy. And it's all about alcohol and drinking. These are all the things that are killing us. So our society is rewarding and encouraging us to be gluttonous, right? And to drink toxin. Like these are toxins. So this is the problem. So this healthy stuff, it's really not great for our social life. The good news is there are some crazy people out there like us that have actually said, hey, you know, I can have fun without alcohol. Yeah. Like the other night when we went out, we did our other ship, and then we went to the, you know, probably a pretty cool bar in Toronto, and we had mocktails. Yeah. Right? Like it was, we had an amazing time. We didn't have any alcohol. Yeah. So I think it's a trend, and I think we're going to see more of it, where people are like, you know what? I don't want to give up. I don't want to steal 3 hours from tomorrow. I don't want to feel crappy for a whole day. You know, like they don't want to do that anymore. People are like, I don't need the alcohol. I'm having a good time without it.
Yeah. I totally agree. Yeah, I've never really been a huge fan of alcohol. So maybe they don't have a really taste for it, but you're right. As a social lubricant, it's something that's kind of expected. Right. People might look at you a little weird if you're having club soda and everyone else is drinking, but it's something I'm doing more of. Yeah, alcohol is really not good for me. Like when I have alcohol, especially with a dessert, like it's like 5 pounds every next day.
There's no health benefits to it. Like there's just zero benefit, and it's all negative.
Yeah, like even the red wine, the
flavonoids.
You can get so you can take resveratrol or whatever, and you can pop those instead of having red wine. Yeah. So yeah, I totally get it. So low fat is definitely out. You know, for me, I don't stick to the keto, but I really try to keep the carbs, you know, very much under control. But for me, that, you know, I'll skip breakfast like 2 or 3 days a week, and then not eat after 8 p.m. And then just there's one day where I don't eat, and that's what's kind of worked for me.
Yeah, and everyone's got to do their own thing. So for me right now, I don't eat till around 2 or 3. I go as long as I can without eating. Okay. My biggest meal is around 2 or 3, and apparently I just read that that's what like the ancient Romans did and the ancient Greeks. Their biggest meal is 2 or 3 in the afternoon. And it again, from a social life, it's terrible. Like, oh, let's have dinner, 7, 8 o'clock at night. And I'm like, no, I don't really want to eat like 3 hours before I'm going to bed. Right. For your social life, this is like all anti-social things. Yeah. But again, you got to decide, do you want to be healthy or you want to be sick?
That social life. Yeah. Yeah. So one thing that is interesting. So I actually did hire a nutritionist for a bit, and he tried to get me to change on the fasting because I think he was very much, and he's very science-based. So I do have to take what he says seriously. So I think it's Tim Ferriss who was the 4-day body, which is you need 30 grams of protein within an hour of waking up.
Yeah. And I think that's true if you're trying to build muscle.
And there's probably, which I think we want to do. I think building muscle is really important, which we will show the world on June 22nd, how important that is. So, and again, building muscle is your reserve. It's what's going to burn your fat in your sleep. So I think you want to do that. So I think the way I just do it is I just do both, right? So there's some days where I pound 30 grams of protein, which is it's like 3 eggs. It's not a lot. Yeah. 30 grams of protein within an hour of waking up, and then we'll go work out. And then there's other days where I skip food and don't eat until noon. And then I say, okay, we'll do some of both. And I think that's part of a principle I think I learned, like Schwarzenegger talks about the body shock principle, right? And that the body will adapt to anything if you do enough. So if you do the 16-8 fasting, right, and you don't eat until a certain period of time, and then you stop eating, that the body does eventually adapt to that.
That's right.
And you'll eat more food inside your feeding window and whatnot. Right. So he talked about more effective training. Sometimes you want to do strip sets. Sometimes you want to do supersets. Like you do these different things so that your body never really adapts. Yeah. And I think it's probably true on a diet side too.
I think so. I think we have to change it up. So I know right now I want to build more muscle. So to build more muscle, the whole 30 grams first thing in the morning. And from what I've read, I need about 200 grams of protein.
It's a lot.
And as a vegetarian, it's a struggle. Yeah. Like I would say before this, I'd be lucky if I was even getting 100. I think that'd be a good day if I got 100.
Yeah, you probably need to have protein shakes.
Right, that's where I get most of my protein. Between the eggs and the protein shakes is where I get most of my protein.
Yeah.
But as a vegetarian or as a vegan, it's really hard.
Yeah.
It'd be really difficult.
Yeah, because a vegan can't even have whey proteins. They have soy protein.
That's right.
You know, for men, you don't want soy protein. So I feel bad for the vegans out there.
Yeah.
I've rarely seen any, you know, attractive vegan person. Like their figures are almost never good. That's my, or cardio buddies are the same. You see these people, you know, typically women in the gym that just do cardio all the time, rarely look good. Marathoners rarely look good. Right. I mean, that's the other thing I look at, right? Who looks good?
Yeah.
You know, and these are typically, for example, sprinters look great. Long distance runners don't. What are sprinters doing? Well, they eat differently, they train differently, right? Yeah. And that's why they look good. So I think that's one of the things
interesting
you do. Okay, intermittent fasting. Yeah, so we talked a little bit about 16/8 versus long. Yeah. Again, I think my answer on this is they're both good.
They're both good.
I do both.
See what's going to work for you.
Yeah, like I think so the long one I do is not so much for the weight loss. That one really is for the immune system reboot sorts of things. I have cancer in my family. I have neurodegenerative disease in my family. You know, both of these like long fasts are good for that. It takes a while. It took me a year before I could really go a full 24 hours. And now it's typically 36 to 48 hours that I do. And that takes a while. Sometimes I get really hungry and I have a little bit of bone broth. So it's like 20 calories and that kind of gets me through.
Yeah, it's really hard. What I would say about intermittent fasting for those that have tried or haven't tried it, it's probably the hardest thing you'll ever do. But the reward you get from it is once you do it, you're like, I can do anything.
Yeah, the mental strength is huge.
Because when you can conquer hunger, which I believe is the most difficult thing for people, you really realize, holy shit, I can do anything.
Yeah.
I'm unstoppable now.
Yeah.
And that's the feeling I get. Like if I can go 18 hours, 20 hours, not eating anything, like I can do anything.
Yeah, it feels awesome. So last Tuesday, for some reason, I was at a Krispy Kreme donut place because I needed a place to work for a bit. At the
interesting place that you
subway station. But you know what?
Kreme.
I had no temptation. It was funny. I was there looking at donuts. I'm like, yeah, it's Tuesday, so I just don't. I don't eat anything on Tuesdays, including donuts. Yeah, but it felt great because I felt like, wow, this is great.
You've
that I can
overcome that. That's awesome.
I've overcome that.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So on a training. So we talked a little bit about F45, which is HIIT. Interesting. I mean, tell me a little bit about what you like about it.
What I can tell you is for 20 years I had personal trainers.
Yeah.
And which was great, super expensive.
Yeah.
They all became good friends. They're still good friends, but I never worked that hard.
Right.
Okay.
It is true.
Because like their business model is to make sure like I keep them employed.
Yeah.
So they're not going to take me to a brink where I'm like, I'm never like they don't take you to that brink where you're just like, you're not going to hire them again. So I love them. They're great. They're all, still friends. But what I found, and this took me a long time to figure out, is a friend of mine says, Roman, you should just try one of these group classes. I'm like, really? I don't think I want to do that. But I work so much harder.
Yeah.
Like today was a great example.
Yeah, it's very low rest. Yeah.
I work so hard, and for me, it's the peer pressure.
Yeah.
And I think I told you the other day, I was like dying in my work. The Saturday was 1 hour, and I was dying. But it was a total stranger. I don't know the guy, but he was like partnered up with me. And then he just made some really nice comment, like, "Hey, like you're really hurt, you're really killing it," or something. And it was that boost. It was that social boost. If I was alone in the gym, Mark, I would have left 15 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Like there's no way I would have pushed myself that hard. But in a class environment, there's peer pressure and there's encouragement. And I think it goes a long way. Yeah. And I think also as humans, we're social beings.
Yeah.
We perform better in humans than alone. So I know a lot of bodybuilding is a very solo type sport. That's probably why I didn't like it. But yeah, I'm finding the group classes for me work really well.
Yeah, I think the best program is the one that you actually enjoy doing, where the experience is good. I do like the solo stuff. I do like putting my headphones on. I do like testing my strength, which is not something you do a lot in HIIT. HIIT is was high intensity interval training.
Right.
I mean, what's great is it really pushes you to work hard without rest. So there's very, very little rest.
Yeah.
And we're just not used to that. I'm not used to it. Sometimes I'll have 3 minutes rest between like big, heavy sets. I think the challenge with it is that I'm just not sure how much. Right now, you're at the point probably because you're not used to doing a lot of training where you're actually able to put on a little bit of muscle. But so I think both. So I do a couple of classes a week.
Yeah.
So I'll do a boxing class, or I'll do some other martial arts class. I do kettlebell class, which is
That's a great one.
Kettlebell classes are great. They really are great.
Amazing.
It's also good to learn how to use those things, because you can, when we fly around and go to, sometimes you go to a hotel gym and there's not much there.
Yes.
But they'll have a set of kettlebells and you can do a full workout there. I do a little bit of both of these. Cardio, actually don't do much of that at all. I think you can substitute that with HIIT. And, I think the idea of sitting on a treadmill for 30 minutes is
me too.
great.
Like I hate cardio as well. It's probably one of the reasons I do like the F45, because they force you, you're doing cardio along the way.
You definitely get your heart rate up,
and,
for sure.
And I know the VO2 max is really, really important in our lives.
Yeah.
And if you don't build that, and it takes time, you got to build over time, that's going to be a problem.
The heart's a muscle. I mean, I've seen some, part of what I'm trying to do here is that none of these issues are fully resolved. These are actually debates that are raging on the internet right now. You go to Reddit now, and you have some really smart people and scientists on both sides that are arguing vehemently about this, which is why I think this is so interesting.
And they're both right, but you've got to do what works for you.
Yeah,
and what I would say about the class, like whether it's Orange Theory or 45, it's nice to go in, not again at 6 in the morning, like I'm not thinking very clearly. I'm just barely awake. They've thought it through. Every day is a different workout. I don't have to have like a notepad and taking notes and what did I do today? What do I do tomorrow? Because to do it properly, like there's some planning required. You've got to be trained. So every day they change it up. They do the thinking for me. I just have to do the work. I love it.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I think that the point I wanted to make was that there are some very smart people that say cardio is a problem and you shouldn't do it. And the reason why is because it makes you hungry. And if diet is 70 or 80% of the battle, why would you want to do cardio, which just makes you hungry and it doesn't really torch your fat like the way a good diet does, or maybe even a cold plunge does. But I think what the answer on that is the heart is a muscle. And muscles have to be worked.
Yeah.
But I think that if you're going to do it, I think HIIT is a better way than sitting on a treadmill for half an hour. Because you're not going to push yourself that hard when you're doing a cardio machine. Whereas you're right, in HIIT, you actually push yourself harder. I think there's some evidence that you actually want to go anaerobic, not just aerobic. So the thing about cardio is it's an aerobic exercise. But what I think what the science is showing is you actually want to be out of breath sometimes. You want to push yourself really hard, which is why that interval training is a good idea. So I would say don't do the cardio unless it's like an alternative to doing nothing. You could sit on a bike and read a book or whatever. Okay, that's good. But I would rather do HIIT a couple times, 2 or 3 times a week, and then strength training the rest.
I think the key is every day we have to sweat. And every day we got to be out of breath. And I think if you're not sweating every day, and you're not out of breath, that's not good.
So I'm going to bring up another one, and I don't know how much you're doing this, and this is mobility. Okay. This is interesting. When you talk to a number of older, fit people, so these are men that are late 60s, early 70s, and you ask them, if you could do it over again, all the things you did for exercise, what would you change? And they say, I would do less strength training and I would do a lot more mobility training. Because they're now older and they're having a hard time. They're not able to reach above their head. They're not able to do a bunch of these things. And I remember I was on a vacation and there was this buff dude. He was very, very impressive guy and was in the gym and is saying, hey, how did you get in such great shape? He says, well, I actually changed a couple of things in the last 2 years. I've doubled the amount of work I do in terms of my stretching and my mobility work and muscle pliability. And I do a lot less of the working out. So I actually developed a bit of back pain in the last month. So I've been going bananas on the yoga and the stretching, whatever. I think this is why I hit my PR today on the incline press. I've never been able to do more than 280 pounds. Today I did 285. And I think it's because I'm actually now looser. And that's what this bodybuilder told me. He's like, I'm doing better in my strength training now that I'm more flexible. I think it's huge. And what we do know as you age, one of the tests they do, it's a really simple test. If you're sitting on a floor, try to get up without using your hands. Right. And you go, oh, that's easy. Well, it's hard. It's really hard. And imagine doing it at 50, at 60, at 70, at 80. And that's a huge predictor of what's going to happen to that person.
Like, so it's really important. You know, I think it's a weakness for me. I do love yoga and I got to do more of it.
Okay. Yeah.
But I think the stretching and even the stretching before workout, after workout, like, I don't know if you follow David Goggins, but he's an, absolute, unbelievable fit athlete, but he spends hours a day stretching, hours.
Yeah. That's not
so
me.
It's amazing.
I stretch. Yeah. So I stretch. I mean, look, we don't have endless time.
Right.
And I can see for what Goggins does for a living, that's important. But so I do a 15-minute stretching routine every morning.
Oh, that's great. That's
so
amazing.
I do that. And yeah, I got, especially for my hamstrings, I got this, it's called a castle flex. And it's basically just like a hammock that kind of fits on your foot. And you basically roll it and you really stretch your hamstrings.
Right.
So for a lot of people, the reason why they have low back pain is that they have tight hamstrings, they have tight hip flexors, and their glutes and their core are not strong.
Yeah.
So if you
guilty of all those.
Yeah. If you have core butt, if you have strong butt, strong core, but you need loose hip flexors and you need loose hamstrings, you can really stay out of trouble for back pain. And low back pain is it afflicts like most people, I think, as they get older. It's terrible. I herniated 2 discs in my back, slinging boxes, warehousing at 17. So
I'd say a third of the people I know have back pain.
Yeah,
it's probably the biggest, because we also sit too much, right? It's a lot of it's because of sitting.
That's why we're standing here. We're standing desks.
Number one standing podcast, standing podcast.
podcast.
But one thing I did learn from Equinox, because I went to different, and I really like the Equinox gyms, and they're great. But every trainer at Equinox, they make you do the foam roller before and after you work out. It's required.
Wow.
So there's just a lot of benefits to the whole stretching, using the foam roller.
That's another thing where there is a controversy on that. But yeah, I mean, Tom Brady, who's older, great athlete. Yeah. He divides his training into basically the muscle building kind of stuff, and then mobility, but then what he calls pliability. So muscle pliability, which is, I do that with massages. I get a Thai massage once a week, but yeah, I also roll on a lacrosse ball, foam rollers, that sort of thing, but keeping the muscles soft for what he does for a living, because he gets, tackled by 400-pound guys. Right. So what he says is, that muscle softness is really important, but the chances are there's other benefits of it. It is controversial, though.
I want to go back to group training again. So I'll give you another example. So, I'm doing the cold plunges. I've done it 4 times now, which is, again, for years, I've been avoiding this. I don't want to do it. But I've done it I think in the last 5 days, I've done it 4 times. But I was building up to it. I did 30 seconds. I got to 60 seconds. And then the night I saw you, I did 2 minutes.
Yeah, with a little bit of peer pressure.
But that's what it was. But again, this is what works. So what happened was they partnered me with this girl. And just before we did it, I watched this other couple, and he was really fit. He looked really fit. And she looked pretty fit too. So after 30 seconds, he got out. She stayed in for 2 minutes. I'm like, I don't want to be that guy. Yeah. So I don't think we can underestimate or overestimate the fact that peer pressure is powerful. And if that's what you need, that's what I needed to go the whole 2 minutes, do it. Yeah. Because on my own, I tell you, I would have jumped out of that freezing water after 30 seconds. But being there with somebody else watching me was 2 minutes.
Love it. Love it. No, I think that's just general principle for a lot of things. We talked about forcing function, but that's another one, right? Right. Having an accountability partner, and having a little bit of competition like that. It's great.
It's one of the reasons I like this podcast, because I know my kids watch this. Yeah. And Carter will hold me accountable. It's Dad, you said that. You're not doing that. We're telling all of our friends and family, this is what we're doing. Yeah. And they're going to hold us accountable. I love that.
That's awesome.
Okay, next.
Let's get into supplements. So as I mentioned, my biochemistry professor told me the biggest scam industry in the world is the vitamin industry. He's like 90% plus of these vitamins you don't need. These supplements you don't need. Now, mind you, he was talking, this would be 1995, 1996. And I think things have changed since then, right? I mean, that orange that you eat today, I mean, you don't know what soil is grown in. Right. That soil, I know from being a part-time farmer, has been depleted of nutrients in a lot of places. So now I think we find that we do need supplementation, at least for some things. So magnesium is well known. That's huge. That we are deficient in it. A lot of people, including myself, we take magnesium, we sleep better. For
mental health, Mark, that's the one, when I have friends that talk about mental health, as soon as they add magnesium, like all of a sudden they're calmer, they're happier. Like it's like a game changer.
Yeah.
Just
it's
that,
good.
just that one.
And on that, I mean, magnesium comes in a lot of forms. Like magnesium glycinate, which gives you glycine, which also we tend to be low in. You, especially as a vegetarian, are low in glycine. So that's the form of magnesium I'd recommend. It also is an important cofactor for vitamin D. And if there's one thing everybody needs to take, especially if you're in a place like Canada where we are, or any northern place, almost everybody is deficient in vitamin D.
That's huge.
Way deficient. So something like 80% of Canadians are deficient, especially if you have darker skin. It's required. I think just now, the Canadian Medical Association is finally coming around that the vitamin D recommendations are way too low.
Yes.
So it's safe to take up to 5,000, international units a day for a man, 4,000 for a woman, which is what I take. So I take 5,000 IU a day, especially in the winter, where we have a lot less sun.
Right.
And that's one thing I think, everybody should do. But it's interesting. There's a lot of other supplements and vitamins and whatever out there. It's still questionable. I mean, if you really need them or not.
So I've been taking vitamins for over 30 years since I became vegetarian, because you pretty much have to.
Yeah.
And I agree that a lot of them probably was a lot of waste. I can tell when I go to the bathroom and it's like orange. It's like, okay, I took too many vitamins, like it's not being processed. So what I do now, and it's helping quite a bit, is I'm getting very specific blood tests,
right,
and very knowledgeable doctors.
Yeah.
And that's the hard part. But you can use ChatGPT that will analyze your blood test and say, what am I deficient in? And now I'm taking it to the next level. And I was showing you today my DNA report where they're looking at gene mutations, and which I actually believe in. And these are very specific gene mutations that are, again, that came from my parents, that I have, my kids have it now. But there's very specific supplements that can help. Right. So I think that learning what type of supplements we actually need or deficient is the key. And I've also learned there is a difference between the cheap ones that we buy, just on a regular, at a regular store, versus some really specific ones. And again, not going to get into specifics right now, but for example, I like AG1. AG1 it's a powder, and there's about 75 different minerals and supplements in it. It's incredibly well sourced where they get it from. And for me to have to take 75 pills every day, I'm not going to do that. So I mix it in my drink. It doesn't taste horrible. I do it once a day. It's helpful. So I do think that, and again, now it's expensive. It might be $88 US a month, but I think being sick is more expensive. Yeah.
No, I remember when I was doing this physique transformation contest, I mean, what came out back then was how a lot of the supplements don't even have in it what they say they do.
Right.
Or
Yes.
they have other things that are not good for you in it. So there are guides, I can't remember right now, but if we put this online, put it in the comments, but you could, there are actually people who do go out and test this stuff and make sure that, it is what it says on a label.
Yeah.
There are definitely some companies that are better than others.
For sure. And I follow a guy named Gary Brecka, and there's certain ingredients they put in the cheaper vitamins that are actually really harmful to you.
Wow. Yeah.
So again, all of this, there's no right answer, but I do think getting your blood work done, finding out what you're deficient in, and a lot of times just getting the right supplementation can take away a lot of the problems that you're taking medications for. So it's
so I agree on that.
benefits.
So if there's one takeaway is to get a blood test done. So I got my blood test done recently, and I found out that my iron is too high in my blood. And as a result of that, there are some supplements for me to take. So for example, quercetin, which will bind with iron and take it out of the blood. Turmeric is another natural ingredient, which is probably another thing it's great to get in your food. It's an antioxidant, it does lots of good things, but it also takes iron out of your blood. It's a whole other separate topic, but there are a number of problems, cancer and neurodegenerative disease that are actually caused by too much iron, which is interesting. But if I didn't do a blood test, I would not have known.
You would not know. And my only caveat to this is be careful with which doctor gives you the results. So for example, for men, once you hit a certain age, you want to get your testosterone checked.
Right.
And so I'll get mine checked, and almost all the doctors are like, oh, it's totally normal. It's where you should be. I'm like, yeah, but I don't want to be at I want to be at 30.
Yeah.
So you've got to find specific doctors that are helping you from a performance perspective to be what you want to be, not just the average. I don't want to be average.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we can get confused as well. So we've got to ask the right questions, the right doctors.
Yeah, that's the whole other thing. I mean, to take exogenous testosterone or not is an interesting one. But you're right. A lot of doctors will, recommend against it because you may be normal for your range. But you want to be normal for a 30-year-old, not a 50-year-old. So that's some of the things I'm studying now. That testosterone and also growth hormone. There's pros and cons. If you do take exogenous testosterone, you kind of have to stay on it for a long time, because if you're off, you're going to crash, and now you're dependent on like outside testosterone. So it's interesting. It's one of the things I'm looking into. I know people who are on TRT cream and they're really happy. I mean, not only are they looking more fit, but they're more focused. They're happier. A lot of who we are as men really comes down to our hormones.
So I think a lot of, instead of going to the doctor where they're just going to give you drugs, which have side effects, try the natural stuff first. Like the supplements are usually a good first place to go to.
A lot of this stuff will maximize your testosterone.
100%.
So if you're lifting weights, if you're lifting heavy, which means you're not just doing F45, you got to do this too. You got to lift heavy. If you're eating enough protein, if you're fasting actually increases testosterone. So in fact, that's one of the things that's interesting is a lot of the same protocol that will essentially reduce diabetes a lot, that will reduce metabolic syndrome, will also maximize testosterone. The same thing. I find that pretty interesting.
And there's also other ways we can get some of these vitamins, like just a 20-minute walk in the morning in direct sunlight. You'll get your vitamin D, even in the winter. But it has to be in the morning. And what I didn't know before was I thought you have to use sunscreen all the time. It's not true. In the morning, you don't have the harmful UV rays.
Did not know that.
Yeah, it happened later. So that's why, because we don't hear that because they're trying to sell us more sunscreen, right? But in the morning, there's like virtually no harmful UV.
Wow, I did not know that.
So it happens later in the day. But just that 20-minute walk, it will reset your circadian rhythm. You're going to sleep better. There's so many like little simple things that we can do. So one of the things I tried this year, and it's been a huge thing for me, is red light therapy. I was showing you the red light therapy bed. Every winter in Canada, I get depressed. Like I can't help but, you go like weeks without seeing the sun here. It's depressing. Hasn't happened this year. So the second thing is I was never able to work out this hard on a 7-day a week, like every day. I was in too much pain to start with the red light therapy. I can go every day. So it does make a huge difference in terms of recovery. And that's why most of the NFL teams now, they get off the field, they're putting them right into the red light therapy rooms.
Wow.
Because it helps recovery. So there's a bunch of benefits that I've learned. Again, for me, it could be all psychological. I don't know, but it's working for me. The fact I can work out 7 days a week, that I don't get this, the seasonal sad, thing. Like it's working.
No, if the NFL player, that's one of the things I've learned is that, professional athletes, like they really have to be on the cutting edge. They have the most access to cutting edge research. So if that's what you're saying is true, then there's probably something to it.
And I think it's important we measure. So for example, one of the things I wear is this Aura ring, and this ring, it's all the NBA players have to use it as well when they're off the game. But it measures my sleep, so I know my actual my REM sleep and a whole bunch of things I get, because I don't want to wear my like Apple Watch at night. But this has been amazing for me, Mark, because what I've learned is if I had like even one glass of alcohol, like it cuts my REM sleep in half.
Wow.
Like, or if I eat like late at night, it destroys my REM sleep is where all of the health benefits come from. So, the other night we were with somebody, she's like, oh, I sleep like all night or whatever. I'm like, okay, but like, I didn't get into like, well, what's your actual REM sleep? Because you might sleep, you think you're sleeping 8 hours, but your REM sleep might be 20 minutes. You got like zero health benefits. So I think, we can only improve what we measure. And I think little devices like a ring, or these are things that I think are really helpful for people.
Yeah, well, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, right? So I think I'm going to get one of those things, so what I got was a device called Lumen. And what that does is you breathe into it and it tells you sort of what percentage of carbs versus fat you're burning, and you want to be burning fat, right? But even after a very low carb day or a fast day, I was still burning quite a lot of carbs, and the reason why is my sleep isn't good. So if your sleep is better, your metabolism is better too. So I think that's my final frontier for me is sleep.
I would say that's probably the most important one, because if you get your sleep right, everything else just you just feel better the next day. You just wake up, you're just like everything is better. Your whole life is better.
Working on it.
So I'll help you with this. I'll coach on this one. Okay,
right on. Okay.
So we covered all our topics.
Yeah, just one more thing. Just eat a steak.
Yeah. Some people will have a steak. Some of us will not have a steak.
Okay,
but,
you have an avocado, all your steak.
Yeah.
Actually, now my iron's too high. It's probably going to be a 3-egg omelet instead of a steak now.
Yeah, but I am a big fan of the avocado. My discovery this last month has been avocado, egg, or sourdough bread. Because sourdough bread doesn't spike your insulin. Amazing. So
I don't know about that, but okay.
that's my new favorite meal.
All right, sounds good.
All right, thank you very much, Mark. Thanks everybody for listening.
Bye-bye.